last week, we talked a bit about ritual in the context of the broken etrog. And after class, our classmate, Sandra Bernovsky, wrote me an email. And she said, we talked about ritual, and I just want to tell you that this coming Shabbat is my birthday, but in November 24, I'm going to be celebrating my bat mitzvah, which I never had.
Oh, wow.
And if you're talking about rituals, she said, I'm doing that because I think it is an important ritual. So, Sandra, that's wonderful, and we look forward to celebrating that with you. And Mazal Tov this coming Shabbat. We won't ask you how old you will be on that bat mitzvah. I don't know if you'll be as old as Stan Solomon, but
there's nobody as old as me right now.
Anyway, okay. To tell you a few things, I'm already going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So, I hope you can see this picture. It's taken at the Hartman Institute last night. What you see is a room, and we were there packing all kinds of supplies for soldiers, mostly for reservists, because the regular soldiers have pretty much all the supplies they need from the army. Israelis and most of these supplies have been flown in from America. We're talking about, what are they called? Camelbacks, you know, water that goes through tubes, and they're put in backpacks. Flashlights that you wear on your head, sleeping bags, goggles, boxer shorts, all kinds of things like that. And they're getting shipments every day. And then truckloads come in, and they need to be packed in numbers and designated to different units. So there we're packing. And this is every day that this has been going on. Now, across, outside, what you see, and if you look very closely, so you see guys, and there's some women there, all in white. And if you look very closely, you can see a young man that's being held up above. He's being carried. What's going on there, and we're seeing it and we're hearing the music, was a wedding of a high-ranking soldier who had come in, as I mentioned before, for his wedding, and he's going back tomorrow. Quite a juxtaposition. And a few couples, after leaving the wedding, came to help out with the packing. Now, about an hour before we went to help pack, the Ramat Kal of the army, the chief of staff, had said, because they make reports, he doesn't speak every day, The spokesperson of the army does, but yesterday he did speak. And he said the following, because he referred to the serious work the soldiers are doing now throughout the country and the weddings that are taking place. And he said, Etzev v'simcha equals koach. Sadness and joy equals strength. Yeah. Wow. And then I heard this. If you don't read Hebrew, you can see the letters are very similar, except for the last letter in each word. A resh at the end of the first, and a kuf at the end of the last. So very often people are feeling very foolish when we ask, so how are you? And so you feel even more foolish if you answer beseder. So someone came up with a more appropriate response. Instead of saying, okay, beseder, saying besedek. Now, what is a sedek? It's a crack in the wall. And that is really how everyone is feeling. You know? Besedek, besedek. Now, well, that was last night. People are being encouraged to not stay home all the time, and certainly not in front of the TV, watching the news all the time. So Monday evening, my shul offered in someone's home an evening in which one of the members, whose specialty is English literature, but if enough Hebrew-speaking people came, she had translated the poems into Hebrew. And she was going to use poetry to allow people to express emotions. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful. One of the women whose husband is in Miluim, reserve duty, and she has two little children. She said, aside from worrying about her husband, what's been the most difficult part is that she, every day at 4 a.m., goes for a run. And she can't do that now because she's not going to leave. And it might sound like a small thing, but that gets her through the day, usually. But another woman who's a high school teacher, she said in these last 2 weeks, she has lost former graduates, 5 former students. Now, she felt very uncomfortable telling us that she was not able to go to any of the funerals because she felt she would not be able to keep it together. She would not be able to then function in her classroom as a mother, and she felt very guilty about that. And then a little later on in the evening, when the woman facilitating the evening showed us a picture and a poem of someone abandoning people in need, she said, that's what I feel like. And I said to her, no. Those young men don't need you anymore. I am sure, because I know who this woman is and what she does for the community. If you were with somebody who still was alive and needed you, I am positive you would not abandon. But it was just a marvelous way of getting people to be able to talk.
Stacy.
Okay, please mute yourself. And I just want to share with you one of the poems that we looked at to give you a sense of the kinds of emotions and issues that parents are dealing with here. And I think parents in your part of the world are also, in having to explain, whether it's to university students, I've heard, or to younger, of what's going on. So this poet, who was born in 1934, see if you understand what the theme is, what she's thinking of. A snail is climbing up the windowsill into your room after a night of rain. You call me in to see, and I explain that it would be unkind to leave it there. It might crawl to the floor. We must take care that no one squashes it. You understand, and carry it outside with careful hand to eat a daffodil. I see then that a kind of faith prevails. Your gentleness is molded still by words from me, who have trapped mice and shot wild birds, from me who drowned your kittens, who betrayed your closest relatives, and who purveyed the harshest kind of truth to many another. But that is how things are. I am your mother, and we are kind to snails. What do you think the mother is feeling a little uncomfortable with? She says one thing to her child, but what does she realize?
Daniel.
Anyone? Anyone?
Just do a search in the search thing for Daniel Nurgats.
Sorry.
Well,
When I read that,
Michael?
it's you have a woman who has done things in her past that she's not very happy about right now, that she probably thought nothing of when she was doing it, like trapping mice and shooting birds and that kind of thing. But now she's a mother, and she's got this child, and I think that child has changed her, because even a little snail, she wants to show her child to offer or to be kind to that simple little thing that in the past she would have probably just stepped on.
Okay. Interesting. Anyone else see it a little differently than Michael?
Bracha,
Zipporah.
the line that says who betrayed your closest relatives, is this Holocaust time?
No, it's earlier. It's earlier.
It's earlier. You said the 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it could say it as if it is. Doesn't matter.
Well,
She's in New Zealand.
Uh,
But share your thought.
no, that changes things. If she's the author is in New Zealand, was she in Europe at the time? I don't have enough information to even make sense. Sorry.
Bracha? Yeah.
I go along in part with what Michael said. I think we have to broaden it. I think the poet is saying to us, we all have our flaws. We have all done things in our lives that we probably regret as we were growing up. But then we take on a different role. And as a parent, we are trying to teach the values that we aspire to our children, so that they really feel that there is somebody in their lives who feels that these things are important, and that if they do them, they will have the backing of that person.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
To me, I think as a mother, she might have done bad things like drowning the kittens or shooting birds to protect her child. But as a mother, she wants her to be kind.
Okay. I think those three we put together, that she's looking for words to be what her child understands, and that to do with the snail to be gentle, and that it shouldn't be squashed, but with a careful hand. And just maybe she's indicating that sometimes, I think you're all suggesting that before she was a mother, she did these things, drown the kittens. And maybe kittens was not a particularly good example for her to give. Maybe wild birds was a better one, as if to say that she's suggesting that sometimes there will be times that you'll have to be a little harsher. Because I brought this in, and I think the woman who facilitated the meeting wanted to suggest that parents here are dealing with this issue of children, listen, we are trying to protect ourselves, but it is not because we are hating people. We are just hating violence and the people who are being violent. And parents are feeling that's very difficult to be explaining both, especially to very young people. It takes a lot to make them understand that. So that was just an example of something, and when you tell a young child, no, there are no monsters in the world, but then the next day you have to say, well, there actually are. Anyway, I try each week, I give you part of what is going on. And those of you who share with me, I appreciate you doing that. And a phrase that we also use here when asked how we are. And this was penned many years ago. Shlomi ki shlom ami. The way I am is how the nation is. And this brings us to Moses, who is the character that we are talking about for the next few weeks. And this is just an introduction to him. And I thought of it because of what we're going through and how so many of you are going through it with us. When Israel are walking through the Midbar and they're attacked by the Amalekites, and Joshua now is leading the battle. But Moshe is on the sidelines. And he's standing above. And he's kind of like a coach. And when they look up to him and his hands are up above, he's encouraging them. And at one point, he gets very tired. And the two people on either side of him want him to sit down. And he sits down, but on a stone. And Rashi explains that he sits on a stone and it's placed under him. And Rashi says, but he, Moses, did not sit on a mattress or on a pillow because he said, Israel is in a state of pain. I too will be with them in pain. And I want to say it again, how important it is for those of us here to know that you are with us here. And it's a little, I don't know how quite to say this, but those of you who have been in Toronto and going about your daily life and thinking of us, okay, but there have been people who have been, so to speak, on vacations and want to have a good time, but they've also been checking in regularly, who were in Greece, Italy, Spain. And it reminded me of Moshe, that even though you've been away and having hopefully a good time, you haven't been sitting on a pillow totally if you've been checking in. And this is Moshe. His people was his life. And that's why he would get so upset with them, because he cared so much. Micah Goodman, one of the thinkers in Israel these days, was asked why he wrote this book, The Last Words of Moses. His simple response: the challenges of Devarim, Deuteronomy, are the challenges of modern Israel and the challenges of modern Jews, all of us. And Moshe, Micah says, had this in mind, that these challenges would exist even in 2023. And therefore, he says what he says in his final addresses, which we will be looking at over the next few weeks. And his last words are the heart of Sefer Dvarim. Now, Micah, an observant Jew, believes that the Torah is divine. But he says that this final book presents itself as a human document. In this final book, Moshe speaks in the first person, telling the nation its story from his personal perspective. Up until Dvarim, Deuteronomy, Moshe is the hero of the Torah. Here, he becomes the narrator. And Micah looks to the Renaissance commentator Abarbanel to address this question. How is it possible that the last book of this divine Bible is a humanly created document? According to Abarbanel, Moses wrote the book of Deuteronomy, but then God included it in the Torah. Now, these kinds of things aren't important to me. The messages are important. And this isn't the thrust of our topic. But it makes sense. Now, Micah refers to Dvarim, Deuteronomy, as the human section of the divine Torah. I'm going to repeat that because I love it. Dvarim is the human section of the divine Torah. And it makes sense because, as we have said so often here, God wants us to work with him. Now, you might know that another word for Dvarim, Deuteronomy, is Mishneh Torah, which means a repetition of the Torah. So much of what has been written in the preceding 4 books is re-mentioned in this final book. But from Moshe's perspective. But, as I said, from his perspective, so there are differences. On the other hand, some things are left out. And what we're focusing on today is the revolution that Moshe creates vis-a-vis religion. The change he suggests that should happen vis-a-vis sacrifices and the tabernacle. I'm driving you crazy because one week I talk about the need for ritual, and then today I'm going to say maybe it shouldn't have such a central role, but that's what studying is all about. So all of these quotes are from Micah Goodman. So I didn't even write his name once. He says, many laws are missing from the book of Deuteronomy, ritual laws, including a significant portion of the ritual laws. Moses makes no mention of the sin and guilt offerings brought in the temple, and he refers only marginally to the burnt offering that is sacrificed 3 times a day. There is not a word about the incense, the arrangement of the candles in the menorah, or the baking of the showbread. Deuteronomy is clearly aware of these laws, but very little of what comprises the book of Leviticus is mentioned in Deuteronomy. And so we might say that rather than repeating the Torah, Deuteronomy abridges it. The sages regard those sacrifices which are consumed by their owners as being of lesser sanctity than sacrifices that are entirely consumed on the altar. But in the book of Deuteronomy, it is specifically those sacrifices of lesser holiness that figure most prominently, perhaps because they may be shared with the poor and the disadvantaged. It is a motif that is repeatedly emphasized. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, and your men servants and your maid servants, and the Levite who is within your cities, for he has no portion or inheritance with you. Deuteronomy emphasizes not how sacrifices bring the individual closer to God, but how they bring people together. So, what is Moshe suggesting Bnei Israel should be focused upon when they enter the new land? Because that's what he is concerned about. Everything that he says to the Israelites in his speeches now is to prepare them for when they enter Canaan, Eretz Israel. They are now to become a new nation, and he wants their focus to be on Ben Adam L'Chaveiro. That's the key. Not on sacrifices in the way that it's been till now. Okay. Now, Micah Goodman appreciates Moshe's understanding that religious rituals are not magical rituals. He wants to go to the extreme of what they were used to seeing in Egypt. You don't perform sacrifices to make something happen. That's in the old world. It's not to get results, to control nature. Rather, it's a way of being loyal to God. Rituals are not a way to express power. For the Egyptians, that's what the motive was. Now, not only does Moshe not mention sacrifices so much in Deuteronomy, but also the tabernacle is going to be mentioned much less. Now that's in great contrast to its great prominence in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, where there is so much description and detail from Bezalel, the great architect, to the people who assisted him, to the people who donated the raw materials, to how it was assembled, and to the ritual laws. So many chapters just about the tabernacle. In Deuteronomy, barely any description. And beyond that, God is not described as being in the confines of the tabernacle. So I want you to already be thinking about, why is the tabernacle losing its significance? And then I'm going to throw you a twist. And why is God not going to be confined to the tabernacle? So, look at all that is said about the tabernacle in Deuteronomy as opposed to Exodus. At that time, the Lord said to me, "You for yourself 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and come up to me onto the mountain and make yourself a wooden ark. And I shall inscribe on the tablets the words that were upon the first tablets, which you shattered, and you shall place them into the ark. I made an ark of acacia wood. Now you 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I ascended the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand, and he inscribed on the tablets like the first writing, the 10 commandments, which the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly, and the Lord gave them to me. And I turned and came down from the mountain and placed the tablets in the ark which I had made, and there they were, and the Lord had commanded me. That's all that is said about the ark in Deuteronomy. Now, we therefore have the following. The sacrificial ritual, just to review, loses its significance. The tabernacle or temple is barely mentioned. And now see what's going to happen. You remember with the patriarchs, they would make altars all over the place and whenever they wanted. Now what's going to happen in Deuteronomy? Moshe instructs the following. Only, but only to the place which the Lord your God shall choose from all your tribes, to set his name there, you shall inquire after his dwelling and come there. And there you shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithes and the separation by your hand and your vows and your donations and the firstborn of your cattle and of your sheep. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice in all your endeavors and your households, as the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall not do as all the things that we do here this day, every man doing what he deems fit. For you have not yet come to the resting place or to the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. And you shall cross the Jordan and settle in the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. And he will give you the rest from all your enemies surrounding you, and you will dwell securely. And it will be that the place the Lord your God will choose, in which to establish his name, there you shall bring all that I am commanding you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, and the separation by your hand, and the choice of vows which you will vow to the Lord. Why? Why do you think? It's a little baffling. On the one hand, less sacrifices, or the sacrifices have less significance, but the temple has the monopoly. Only in the tabernacle can you give those sacrifices. Why do you think Moshe wants that?
I think it sets up a sense of community. It sets up a place. It sets us a place that people have to come to, and they have to come to together.
Okay. Anybody else? Nice. And I want to remind you again, he's saying all this as they are about to enter and build themselves up as a nation. Anyone else?
I just want to add, I would like to add the last comment that it's no longer each person for themselves, everybody for themselves, but rather now we're working as a kohel, as a community for Hashem.
Okay, good. Somebody else was.
The other idea is that before, everybody could offer their own sacrifice wherever they wanted to, which is there's no rules, regulations, that they could do anything they want, basically. And I think this is the first step in taking us away from sacrifice, because I think sacrifice was something God gave us knowing we simply couldn't go from human sacrifice to prayer in one step. So I think this way, we're going to have it just one place, not wherever you want to go, my rules, and then we can slowly get you off it from there.
Okay. All of those, I think 3 from Brenda, Michael, and Shirley Ann. Put those together. Yes. Anyone else? Another example would be, up until this point, the Paschal sacrifice, Pesach, originally, they were to eat it by family. At this point, Moshe tells them, you're now going to do it as a nation. And he actually uses the term nationalization, all fitting in what the 3 of you just said. Very, very important. Anyone else? Okay. Now, he goes on and says the following. The book of Leviticus, Vayikra, refers on 2 occasions to a commandment that is not at all in the book of Dvarim, Deuteronomy, namely the commandment to revere the temple. How is it possible that Deuteronomy, which moves all the religious activity to the temple, does not include this commandment? Deuteronomy does not emphasize the temple. Instead, it seems that the point of concentrating all ritual in the temple is not to make the temple more salient, but rather to make the ritual less so. The book that de-emphasizes ritual does not detract from mass responsibility to worship God. But as Michael just said, there's got to be another way to worship God. So the question is, but if not primarily through the sacrificial ritual, then how? And it's not just going to be prayer. Who says Shema Yisrael first?
The children of Jacob on his deathbed. That's the Midrash.
That's the Midrash.
Yeah, he was worried about the future, and they all said in unison, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." So, don't worry, Dad. You gave us the message.
Okay, so here, Moshe says it in Dvarim. Okay, now, this is his suggestion for what is more important, a way to worship God. And all of you in this class, and I know it is only one of many that you people participate in, this is what his hope is for Am Yisrael. He says, "Hear, O Israel," he's talking to them, "the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." And look what he says. I don't want you to be doing things for a reward. Even though we know that he's going to discuss that if you don't do the things you should be doing, you won't last here. That's another area we'll get to. But he says, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your means. And these words, which I command you this day, shall be upon your heart. But then what does he go on to say? And this is what you have to do. And you shall teach them to your sons and speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk on the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. This is an ongoing activity. Mishneh Torah, repeating. And when you repeat and you learn, you see different things. And Micah concludes this section with the following. Devotion to God is expressed by reviewing God's words. Moses' final address, or at least parts of it, need to be recited every day, all day, by all of the Jewish people. Upon entering the land, the words of the address must be carved onto a rock. Moreover, the king must write down Moses' address in a book and study it his whole life. And once every 7 years, the people are commanded to gather together to read the speech again. In other words, the book that rids the public space of ritual is the same book that fills the public space with words. And the holy words to which the people need to keep coming back will replace ritual sacrifice as the focal point of religious life. The book of Deuteronomy thus heralds the Talmudic transformation from sacrifice to Torah study. There was a shift from the temple to the study house, and from ritual to reading, reciting, and reviewing. Now, one can say that that makes a case for those who say we're meant to study day in and day out. There's a way of doing that plus everything else that needs to be done. And I said this last week, but this week it has been probably right up there with the discussions about the hostages, the overwhelming activity of the Haredim looking to be drafted and their efforts toward volunteering. I guess I feel the need because so much of the time over the years we've not been so kind. But of course, on both sides, everyone is saying, whoever has the opportunity, that the sense of unity must remain after this, please God, is finished, whenever that will be. Anyone have a comment or something else they would like to share about this? And this is considered a revolution. Moshe getting away from, as Michael said, sacrificial worship. Now, of course, later on, temples become a very important part of Jewish society for various reasons. But, okay. Anyone else?
Bracha, Moses is doing exactly what God had planned for his relationship with the Jewish people. He's taking the words of God and he's translating it and making it so that the responsibility now goes to the people to carry it forward in a way that's not going to focus them in on a place or a practice, but on their relationships with one another. And what Moses says actually at the end is that you've got to feel these things. They can't just be words. They have to be part of your inner being.
Absolutely, Marlene. Exactly. And it can't be dependent on him either. And he makes that very clear, that he's a prophet, but unlike other religions, the prophet in our religion has no more importance than another fellow Jew. He's just a messenger, really.
Bracha, I'd like to question or make the comment that I have heard that some people are worried about a third temple on the Temple Mount, because they're worried that then we would be doing animal sacrifices again. And I've heard somebody else, actually a prominent person, say, well, we have to get used to the idea of doing animal sacrifices. We're just not used to that. So I would appreciate your comments on that, because from what we just heard you say, the Torah study basically during the time of Moshe replaced the animal sacrifice. Or maybe I misunderstood what you said.
No, I think Micah would first of all tell you that there's a different sensibility these days. I'm sure there are. The name escapes me now, but there is a group that have in the old city that are preparing for the building of a third temple. They are. Now, you can be preparing for the building of a third temple. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are looking to have sacrifices, but they might be. But it doesn't mean that has to happen. But in our sensibility, remember, a lot of things that have happened or happened in the past is because that's what was happening in the world. Human sacrifice. Did we do human sacrifice? No. We had slaves because that's what was going on in the world. Do we believe in slaves now? No. Shirley Ann? If tomorrow's a good day, I'll go there and I'll check it out. Not really. I'm not going to that part of the city.
But I heard somebody in Toronto, a prominent person, say, we just need to get used to animal sacrifice. And yes, it will come back.
Who's that prominent person, Shirley Ann?
No, I can't say.
And he's going to do that from Toronto? Okay. Shirley Ann, I think that should be the last thing you're worrying about now. I think. Or maybe it should be the most, I don't know.
Not worried.
Yeah. You know what they have? You remember the milk cartons that you'd have a child who's missing? Well, they have that in the milk cartons now, all the kidnapped children.
The pictures are also posted like in my neighborhood.
So a group
I saw they were actually the railway bridge on New Westminster. Under the bridge, somebody has put up all the posters.
Yeah.
So my group is part of a large umbrella group called Canadians for Israel. The group is planning to have a vigil Sunday morning at 11 o'clock at Earl Bales Park for the kidnapped, for those who are in Gaza.
Oh, good to know.
Did you hear the mother who flew in from Israel 2 days ago?
No.
No? I'll have to try to send it. Yeah. All right. Hey. What else?
Just curious.
Rita.
Whether anyone has experienced any personal attack or what should I call it? My son-in-law did yesterday.
So tell us.
He was coming out of a coffee shop, and a young.
Where?
This is on Avenue Road between Lawrence and York Mills. Anyway, he went to get into his car, and a young Middle Eastern fellow, clutching a handful of the posters, which he had obviously ripped off of pillars or somewhere, and jumped in front of Michael's car and said, "Kill me, I dare you, kill me."
Oh my God.
And then proceeded to, Michael had started the car, but in these cars, the doors don't lock until you've actually moved a bit. And his hadn't locked. So this young man ripped open his door, started swearing at him, menacing, kicked the mirror. Anyway, Michael took off, he just took off on him. He was very shaken. Called the police, and they said they would go around the neighborhood. He followed the guy afterwards. He circled the block, and the young man was continuing down Avenue Road. And he did report that. He called the police, and they said they would follow up on it, but that they were very, very busy with this kind of attack, this kind of threat. The irony is that Michael's a very tall, good-looking young man. You couldn't pick out whether he was Jewish, Nish Jewish. Michael was adopted at birth, and his birth parents were definitely not Jewish. So, they're just running after people, I guess. And he was in a Jewish neighborhood, and there you go. So there are all kinds of these little stories around, unfortunately. And as somebody said, we are probably going to have to get used to that a bit.
Did you hear about this woman in Detroit?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So she's.
They haven't. They've been very cautious about contributing that to be a racist or anti-Semitic murder.
She was involved with friendship with Muslim, and apparently Tlaib is a friend of hers.
Who?
Rashida Tlaib, the Muslim spokesperson, I think in the Congress. This woman, this president of the synagogue, worked with the Muslim neighborhood to, sort of ecumenical friendship. So Rashida Tlaib indicated that she was a friend of hers, and Rashida Tlaib is constantly speaking about anti-Israel statements and, pro the boycott and everything else. So, the president of the synagogue, worked with the Muslim community, and that's probably why they don't want to indicate it as a possible anti-Semitic attack.
Hate crime.
I read up some of the articles that were online about the president of the synagogue.
Oh.
So again, like even if you try and help them, you don't know. You just can't trust, unfortunately.
Well, one of the women from down south on one of the kibbutzim said that one of the Arabs who had, there's a term, Ben Bayit, somebody, a man who had been like welcomed into their homes. He was a worker for 30 years. He'd come in, have coffee. They found out that he had passed on information about all the families, how many kids in the family, the names, 30 years. Yeah.
How is your family doing, Bracha?
We're besedek. Remember
Good
the word
I
just taught you?
Good word, yes, yes.
Crack in the wall. Yeah.
We have to continue to hope and pray and
keep the faith.
We have to be very vigilant in Toronto here. We're constantly told to watch social media. There's a lot of stuff, misinformation, lies going around that people who are a little bit vulnerable are picking up, people are in our own faith, picking up stuff. And it's a lot of garbage. And you have to know how to distinguish and report it. So a lot of this is being reported to certain people, and people will take action to try to get that removed from social media or track down where it came from.
Actually, Honest Reporting Canada is doing a very good job.
Yes,
of keeping up with the media and reporting it to the community and asking for action to be taken.
And it's important as to where people are getting their information from as far as news. Certain newspapers are not doing what they should be doing. The National Post, which we get, is worth subscribing to. Let me tell you that.
It's been amazing.
You're getting the goods. Most of the editorials, most of the journalists are not Jewish, and they are doing a fantastic job.
Think about the only issue, the only media that are really helpful are, the National Post and Fox TV, where you're getting a fairly honest reportage.
It was very interesting because we tend to be very critical of the Star newspaper with good reason. But yesterday, one of their reporters got full page, Rosie DiMano.
She's good.
She is very good.
She's been
I highly recommend you read. I highly recommend you read her article.
Yeah, they're featuring. Uplifted. I think the Star, after many years of losing subscriptions, are trying to feature Rosie DiMano right now, and she is doing a fantastic job.
Yeah,
but it's a bit of an anomaly at the Toronto Star.
But she's about the only one.
Yeah,
she's always been a good spokesperson for the Jewish people, always in her whole reporting career.
But unfortunately, they also put in a lot from Reuters or AP, and and Al Jazeera, and they quote Al Jazeera, and unfortunately, they're hearing a lot of the fake news.
Yes.
There's something going on from Israel, apparently at Tel Aviv University. Foreign students are getting together and trying to write the truth to the people in their countries, because they're saying in all the different countries, they're getting information about the the untruths, the lies that are going on, and they're trying to send out to all their communities what the truth really is from the Israeli perspective. So that was, I think, in the Jewish press this morning.
Batya has a few friends here who have come from the States, from different universities, and they are so upset with their universities being so silent. Like a friend of hers from Binghamton University, which had so many Jews, and she wrote a beautiful letter to them. She hasn't heard back. How disappointed she is at their silence.
Apparently a student at University of Toronto, I believe, a medical student, was censured because she wrote something positive about Israel.
Well, unfortunately, the U of T is at the bottom of the list as far as promoting Israel or saying anything nice. They are the worst, apparently. And the rest of them aren't much better in Canada. Bracha, it's a real revelation. It really opens your eyes up as to what's been going on at the universities, because this has really shown their true colors.
Well, there's a lack of really good ethical education, and this is at the highest level. And I mean, when you hear about a law school which was just recently established in the name of Lincoln Alexander, who was a Black activist and became the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, and you see the crap that's coming out of that law school. I mean, it's horrific, absolutely horrific.
It's like the whole world's against us. Do you know that at York University too, they're going to sue them for all the pro-Palestinian information that they're giving out there, and they're protesting they're protesting against Israel. It's just terrible. And there's another group of people that are Jews that are anti-Zionist, and they're for the Palestinians.
There've been actually demonstrations in front of the Israeli consulate here, led by Jews, so-called progressive Jews in the community.
Oh, terrible, terrible. What's the matter with these people?
They're only Jewish in name, in birth. They're not really Jewish.
Last name might be Jewish, but they it's one thing to be an atheist, but to be against our own people is another story.
Well, if you go back in history, back to 1750 to 1800, and before the emancipation, there were quite a few. They used to call them self-hating Jews. They were all throughout Prussia and Russia, and it's been there. It's
still there.
Yeah.
Awful. We have enemies all around us. There's more.
They've infiltrated.
That's for sure.
There was a huge demonstration in the American Congress, strictly Jewish group that was anti-Israel, pro-Hamas.
And why does Trudeau let so many of them in? That's just, they plead to come in here. If they're not happy with it here, let them go back home.
Why don't our police tamp down or stop a lot of these rallies? For tonight, apparently, there's going to be a big rally around 7:30 from the pro-Palestinian side. And it's all lies that they're promoting, and it's full of hate.
Where's
our government? Yeah.
A horrific time. The forensic doctors. It's awful to watch them who are having to identify.
Absolutely.
They put them on TV, and some of the younger doctors were being interviewed, and they say to see their senior doctor crying, I just, and some of them, they say they won't be able to identify because they don't have pre-DNA and to identify.
It's not good for you to watch TV. It's not good for any of us here either, but it's got to be worse for you.
I take care of myself.
Yesterday, I was sent an email to tell me that a major law firm in Toronto has been hired to bring a suit against York University for not doing anything about all the professors, the students who are spewing, untruths about Jews.
It was posted today, Sarah. They're doing, I think it's a $15 million class action lawsuit against York University for all of the anti-Semitic activity that's gone on at the university.
Right.
But is that from an organization based in Israel?
It's from a Toronto law firm, Diamond and Diamond.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
It won't be going anywhere for a long time.
Well, I mean, it's better than nothing.
The only problem is York president is the only one of the universities that has taken a stand against the student groups, and we'll have to see where that goes.
Again, so many universities in the States have not taken a stand, and many of their, the Florida University stood with Israel. University of Florida stood with Israel. And he threatened students if they were going to be pro-Palestinian. But so many people now are refusing to send donations to the bigger universities that have been silent.
In the US, but not Toronto.
No.
You don't know that, Shirley Ann.
Okay, I'll accept that, Marlene. I know of some donors who in the past have refused to withdraw their donations, that they have said they prefer their name on university buildings, and that's a fact because I heard them. But today, I can't guarantee. You're right. I have to go, everybody. Thanks, Bracha. Thanks so much.
Stay healthy and well.
You too.
Yeah, we're thinking of you, Bracha. You and your family, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I throw in a positive ending?
Okay.
Thanks, Bracha.
Have a good week.
All the best, everybody.
Bracha, if your hair if you weren't intentionally turning your hair white, it probably, with all this that's going on, it would automatically turn white, right?
Yeah. No.
You have to share a little laughter too.
You certainly
great.
And we do actually.
I read something yesterday that I hadn't seen before. Maybe others have seen it. An essay that Mark Twain wrote called Concerning the Jews. If you want to lift your spirits a little, read it.
Okay.
1899, apparently. I don't know. Someone sent it to me. I just Googled it. And
you didn't read it then, Rita?
I read the article. It was fantastic. Oh, thank you a lot. I didn't know that. Anyway, I think it's definitely worth a read and lift your spirits.
All right.
Concerning the Jews.
Okay.
Take care, Bracha. Take care.
You too.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Bracha.
Bye.
Thank you, Bracha.